Lieutenant Jake Carter stood at the loading dock of the human transport ship and looked out at the alien world before him. The planet was called Valara Prime. It was the home of the Valari Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. The sky was purple and two suns hung low on the horizon. Everything looked strange and beautiful and dangerous. Jake was 32 years old. He had spent 12 years in the Earth military corps. He had fought in 3 wars and survived wounds that should have killed him twice. But none of that mattered here. On this world, he was just a guard. A simple security officer assigned to protect the human diplomatic team. The Valari were an old species. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. Their bodies were tall and thin, with skin that changed colors like oil on water. Most of the time, they looked violet or silver. Their eyes were large and bright, without any white part, just pools of liquid silver. They lived for 500 years or more. To them, humans were like children, short-lived, weak, barely worth notice. But humanity needed allies in the galaxy. The Valari controlled 40 star systems and had technology far beyond anything Earth could make. So the diplomats came with smiles and gifts, hoping to start a friendship between the two species. Jake did not care about politics. His job was simple: keep the humans safe, watch for danger, stay alert. That was all. The diplomatic team walked down the ramp and onto Valari soil. Ambassador Lisa Morgan led the group. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. Behind her came 6 other diplomats and 4 more guards like Jake. They were all dressed in their best uniforms, trying to look impressive. A group of Valari waited for them at the bottom of the ramp. They wore robes made of some shining material that moved like water. At the front stood a tall female Valari with deep violet skin. Jake knew from his briefing that this was High Minister Veth, one of the closest advisors to the Empress herself. The greeting was formal and cold. The Valari did not smile. They did not shake hands. They simply bowed their heads slightly and spoke words of welcome in their musical language. The translation devices turned their words into English, but something was lost. The warmth that humans put into greetings was simply not there. Jake watched everything. He watched the Valari guards standing at the edges of the landing area. He watched the servants moving in the background. He watched the windows of the tall crystal buildings that surrounded them. His hand stayed close to his weapon, even though he knew it would do little good against Valari technology. They were taken to the royal palace by a floating transport that moved without any sound. The palace was enormous. It was made of something that looked like glass, but was harder than any metal known to Earth. Towers rose up into the purple sky, and bridges connected them at impossible angles. It was beautiful in a cold way, like a sculpture made of ice. Inside, the halls were wide and empty. The Valari did not decorate their spaces like humans did. There were no paintings, no flowers, no personal touches. Everything was clean and perfect, and somehow lifeless. The diplomatic team was given rooms in the guest wing. Jake and the other guards were placed in smaller rooms nearby. They had 2 days to rest before the official ceremonies would begin. Jake did not rest much. He walked the halls. He memorized the layout of the palace. He noted where the exits were, where the guards stood, which doors were locked and which were open. Old habits from old wars. On the 2nd day, he saw her for the first time. Princess Kalith was the youngest daughter of Empress Sithara. She was smaller than most Valari, though still taller than Jake. Her skin was pale silver, almost white, and her eyes were larger than normal, giving her a look of constant surprise. She was young by Valari standards, only 120 years old, which made her almost a teenager in their long lives. She was walking through the gardens when Jake was doing his security check. She stopped and looked at him with open curiosity. Most Valari ignored the humans completely. treating them like furniture. But Keleth stared at him like he was some strange animal she had never seen before. "You are human," she said. Her voice was high and musical. "Yes, Your Highness," Jake replied. He kept his posture straight and his face neutral. "I have read about your species," she said. "You live such short lives. 80 years, sometimes 90. How do you bear it, knowing you will die so soon?" It was a strange question, asked without any cruelty. She seemed genuinely curious. "We try not to think about it too much," Jake said. "We just live each day as it comes." Keleth tilted her head like a bird examining something interesting. "Strange," she said. "Very strange." Then she walked away, her silver robes flowing behind her. Jake thought nothing more of it. The ceremony came on the third day. It was a formal dinner in the great hall of the palace. The room was massive, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. A long table stretched from one end to the other, covered with foods that Jake could not identify. Empress Sithara sat at the head of the table. She was ancient, even by Valari standards, over 400 years old. Her skin was deep purple, almost black, and her eyes held a weight of centuries. She moved slowly and spoke rarely, but when she did speak, everyone listened. Jake stood against the wall with the other guards. They were not invited to sit at the table. They were there to watch, to protect, to be invisible. The dinner lasted for hours. Speeches were made. Toasts were raised. The diplomats talked about friendship and cooperation and mutual benefit. The Valari listened with polite disinterest. Jake could tell they did not think much of humanity. They were only meeting with them because it cost them nothing to be polite. Princess Keleth sat near the middle of the table. She looked bored. Several times, Jake caught her looking in his direction with that same curious expression she had worn in the garden. It was near the end of the dinner when Jake noticed something wrong. One of the servants was moving differently than the others. The Valari servants glided smoothly, almost floating across the floor. But this one was tense. His movements were sharp and quick. His eyes kept darting toward the royal family. Jake watched him carefully. The servant was carrying a tray of drinks. He moved closer to the royal end of the table. His hand was shaking slightly. Then Jake saw it. A flash of crystal hidden beneath the sleeve of the servant's robe. It was a blade. Valari blades were made of a crystal that could cut through almost anything. And the servant was moving toward Princess Keleth. Jake did not think. He did not calculate. He did not weigh his options or consider the consequences. His body simply moved. He pushed off from the wall and ran. The Valari guards were too slow to react. They had not seen what Jake had seen. The servant pulled the blade from his sleeve and lunged toward the princess. Jake reached her first. He threw his body between the blade and the princess. The crystal edge sliced through his uniform, through his skin, through his muscle. It went into his shoulder and kept going, piercing deep into his chest. Pain exploded through his body like fire. He fell. Blood poured out of him and spread across the white marble floor. The Valari guards finally reacted, grabbing the attacker and forcing him to the ground. Screams filled the air. Chaos erupted in the great hall. Jake lay on the floor, staring up at the high ceiling. His vision was getting dark around the edges. He could feel his heart struggling to beat, pumping blood out of the wound with every pulse. A face appeared above him. Silver eyes, pale skin. Princess Keleth was looking down at him with an expression he could not read. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do that?" Jake tried to answer, but no words came out. Only blood. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was those silver eyes, wide with something that might have been wonder. The Valari doctors worked on Jake Carter for 9 hours. They had never operated on a human before. His body was strange to them. Too soft, too fragile, too full of red blood that would not stop flowing. The blade had gone through his shoulder and into his chest. It had cut through his lung and scratched his heart. By every measure the Valari doctors knew, he should have been dead within minutes. No creature could survive such a wound without immediate treatment. And even with treatment, the damage was too great. But Jake Carter would not die. His heart stopped on the operating table. The Valari doctors stepped back, believing it was over. Then, somehow, it started again. They watched with wide silver eyes as this human body fought against death with a stubbornness they had never seen. They pumped him full of their medicines, but his body rejected most of them. Human biology was too different. So they called Earth. They spoke with human doctors across the vast distance of space. They learned how to treat human wounds, how to patch human organs, how to give human blood. Jake's heart stopped a second time. Again, it started back up. The lead Valari doctor, a thin male named Physician Malith, stood watching the monitors that tracked Jake's vital signs. He had been practicing medicine for 200 years. He had saved thousands of lives. But he had never seen anything like this. He should be dead, Malith said to his assistants. His body has suffered damage that would kill any Valari instantly. Yet he continues to fight. How is this possible? No one had an answer. News of what happened spread through the palace within hours. A human guard had thrown himself between an assassin's blade and Princess Keleth. He had taken a killing blow meant for Valari royalty, and now he was fighting for his life in the medical wing. The story reached Empress Sithar before the night was over. She sat in her private chambers, listening to the report from her advisors. Her ancient face showed no emotion, but her mind was working hard. "Tell me again," she said. "What exactly did this human do?" High Minister Veth bowed low. The assassin was a member of the Separatist faction, Majesty. He had infiltrated the palace staff. When he attacked Princess Keleth, the human guard intervened. He placed his own body between the blade and the princess. He took the wound that was meant for her. Why would he do this? Sithara asked. What did he have to gain? Nothing, Majesty. He had nothing to gain. Princess Keleth is not of his species. She is nothing to him. There was no logical reason for his action. Sithara was silent for a long moment. In her 400 years, she had learned to understand the motivations of many species. Greed, fear, ambition, self-preservation. These were the forces that drove most beings in the galaxy. But this human had acted against all of those instincts. He had risked everything for nothing. I wish to see him, the Empress said finally. The next morning, Sithara walked into the medical wing. Her guards tried to follow, but she waved them away. She wanted to see this human alone. Jake lay on a bed designed for Valari bodies, too long for his shorter frame. His skin was pale, almost gray. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped and hummed. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a struggle. Sithara stood at the foot of his bed and studied him. He looked so weak, so breakable. His species had only been traveling among the stars for a few decades. They were infants in the universe, barely learning to walk. Yet this one had done something that warriors of ancient species had failed to do. He had acted without hesitation, without thought for himself, without any hope of reward. What are you? Sithara whispered to his sleeping form. What kind of creature risks everything for nothing? She stayed for an hour, watching him breathe, watching his heart monitor struggle and stabilize. Then she left and called her council together. Princess Keleth did not wait for permission. She went to the medical wing that same day and demanded to be let in. The doctors tried to stop her, saying the human needed rest, but she pushed past them. She was a princess. No one could truly stop her. She pulled a chair next to Jake's bed and sat down. For a long time, she just watched him. She had never been this close to a human before. Up close, she could see the differences clearly. His skin was rough and brown, covered in tiny hairs. His features were flat and simple compared to Valari faces. He was small and compact, built for a heavier gravity. Than Valara Prime. He looked fragile, temporary, like something that might break or disappear at any moment. And yet, he had stepped between her and death without a single moment of hesitation. Caliph did not understand. She had been raised to believe that all species acted in their own self-interest. It was the fundamental law of survival. Every creature looked out for itself first. Alliances were formed for mutual benefit. Sacrifices were made only when the return was greater than the cost. But this human had gained nothing. He had only lost. He had nearly lost his life. "Why did you save me?" she asked his sleeping face. "What did you want from me?" She came back the next day, and the day after that. Each time, she sat by his bed and watched him fight his invisible battle against death. The doctors told her his chances were growing better, but they still could not explain how he had survived. On the 5th day, Jake opened his eyes. He woke slowly, like swimming up from deep water. Everything was blurry at first. Then shapes began to form. White walls, strange machines, and a face hovering above him. A silver face with large eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. "You are awake," Princess Kayla said. Jake tried to speak, but his throat was dry and cracked. Caliph held a cup of water to his lips. He drank a little, coughed, and tried again. "Where am I?" His voice sounded strange to his own ears, weak and thin. "You are in the Royal Medical Wing," Caliph said. "You have been unconscious for 5 days. The doctors say it is a miracle you are alive." Slowly, the memories came back to him. The dinner, the servant with the blade, running, pain, darkness. "The assassin," Jake said. "Did he hurt you?" Caliph stared at him. Of all the questions he could have asked, he asked about her. Not about his own condition. Not about what would happen to him. He asked about her. "No," she said. "You stopped him. Your body blocked his blade." She paused. "You saved my life." Jake nodded weakly. "Good. Why?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Why did you do it? You could have died. You nearly did die. I am not of your species. I am nothing to you. Why would you risk your life for me?" Jake looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were strange to her. Small and dark, with a white part surrounding colored circles. Human eyes. But there was something in them she did not recognize. Something warm. "Because you were in danger," he said simply. "Because I could help. Because it was the right thing to do." "But the cost," Caliph insisted. "The risk. It makes no sense." Jake smiled weakly. It was a strange expression, but Caliph was beginning to learn what it meant. "Maybe it does not make sense," he said. "But that is what humans do. We protect people. We help people. Not because we expect something in return, but because that is who we are." Caliph sat back in her chair. She had studied human history and culture before the diplomatic visit. She knew about their wars and their violence. She knew about their short lives and their limited technology. But she had not understood this part of them. This strange drive to sacrifice themselves for others. "Rest now," she said finally. "You are still healing." Jake closed his eyes. Within seconds, he was asleep again. Caliph stayed by his bed until morning. She had many more questions. She had a feeling that this human, this Lieutenant Jake Carter, had much more to teach her. And somewhere in the depths of the palace, Empress Sithara was having similar thoughts. This human had done something extraordinary, something that challenged everything the Valari believed about lesser species. She would not let him slip away so easily. She wanted to understand what drove beings like him. What made humans capable of such selfless acts? Perhaps there was more to this young species than anyone had realized. Word of what Jake Carter had done spread across the Valari Empire in the weeks that followed. The story traveled from world to world, carried by traders and diplomats and news services. A human had saved a Valari princess. A human had taken a blade meant for royalty. A human had nearly died protecting someone who was not his own kind. The reactions were mixed. Some Valari dismissed it as an accident. The human must have slipped. He must have fallen at just the wrong moment. No species could be truly selfless. It went against every law of nature. Others were curious. They wanted to know more about these strange creatures from a single planet who had only recently learned to travel among the stars. On Valara Prime, the footage from the Great Hall was played again and again. Security recordings showed Jake Carter standing against the wall, then suddenly moving. They showed him running toward the princess while the Valari guards were still looking around in confusion. They showed him throwing himself in front of the blade, taking the wound, falling to the floor in a spreading pool of blood. Military experts analyzed his movements. They noted how fast he had reacted. They calculated the distance he had covered in such a short time. They measured the angle of his body as he shielded the princess. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Jake Carter had made a choice in that moment. He had seen the danger and decided to put himself between it and Princess Kael. It was not an accident. It was a deliberate act of sacrifice. Empress Sithara watched the footage in her private chambers. She watched it many times, studying every detail. She had ruled the Valari Empire for almost 200 years. In that time, she had learned to read beings of many species. She had learned their motivations, their weaknesses, their hidden desires. But she could not read this human. "Bring him to me," she commanded. "When he is well enough to walk, I wish to speak with him." Jake recovered faster than anyone expected. The Valari doctors said it was impossible. His wounds should have taken months to heal, if they healed at all. But within 3 weeks, Jake was on his feet. Within 4, he was walking the halls of the medical wing. Within 6, he was declared fit for release. The scars remained. They would always remain. A thick line of damaged tissue ran across his shoulder and down his chest, marking where the crystal blade had cut through him. The doctors offered to remove the scars with their advanced technology, but Jake refused. "Scars remind us of what we survived," he said. "I want to remember." On the day of his release, a palace guard came to escort him to the throne room. Jake put on a fresh uniform that the human delegation had sent him and followed the guard through the crystal halls. The throne room was the largest space in the palace. It could hold thousands of people, though today it was nearly empty. Only the Empress and her closest advisors were present. Standing at the far end of the room where the throne sat on a raised platform, Jake walked the length of the room alone. His footsteps echoed in the vast space. He kept his head up and his back straight, even though his chest still ached with every breath. He would not show weakness. Empress Sithara watched him approach. She sat on her throne, a structure of twisted crystal that seemed to grow out of the floor itself. Her deep purple skin looked almost black in the dim light. Her silver eyes followed his every step. Jake stopped at the base of the platform and bowed his head. He was not sure what the proper greeting was, but respect seemed appropriate. "Lieutenant Jake Carter," Sithara said. Her voice was low and smooth, like water flowing over stones. "You have caused quite a stir in my empire." "I did not mean to cause any trouble, Your Majesty," Jake replied. "Trouble?" Sithara rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him. Her advisors shifted nervously. It was rare for the Empress to approach anyone like this. You saved my daughter's life. You nearly died doing so. And you call this trouble? I was just doing my job, Jake said. Cythera stopped in front of him. She was a head taller than him, but she bent down slightly to look into his eyes. I have lived for 400 years, she said. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species tear themselves apart with war and greed. I have learned that every creature acts in its own interest. That selflessness is a pretty lie we tell ourselves to feel better about our selfish natures. She paused. And then you come along and destroy everything I thought I knew. Jake did not know what to say, so he said nothing. You are not protecting your own kind, Cythera continued. My daughter means nothing to your species. Your government would not have cared if she died. Your career would not have suffered. You had nothing to gain by saving her and everything to lose. And yet you did it anyway. It was the right thing to do, Jake said. The right thing. Cythera repeated the words like she was tasting them. Such a simple phrase. And yet, it explains nothing. What makes it right to throw away your life for a stranger? What drives a being to sacrifice itself for someone who is not even its own kind? Jake thought about the question. It deserved a real answer. Where I come from, he said slowly, we have a saying. You do not leave people behind. It does not matter who they are or where they come from. If someone is in danger and you can help, you help. That is what makes us human. Cythera was silent for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room. She smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was there. I have decided something, Lieutenant Carter, she said. I am not going to let you leave. Jake's heart jumped. Your Majesty? Not as a prisoner, Cythera added quickly. As a guest. An honored guest of the Valari crown. You have shown me something I thought extinct in this universe. A genuine desire to help others without any thought of reward. I wish to understand it better. I wish to understand you. But my duties, Jake said. The human delegation will be returning to Earth. They may return if they wish. But you will stay. I will speak with your government. I am sure they will agree. There was a slight edge to her voice. Both of them knew that Earth could not refuse a request from the Valari Empress. Jake considered his options. He could argue. He could protest. He could demand to be allowed to leave. But something told him that would be a mistake. And besides, there was a part of him that was curious too. He had nearly died for these people. Perhaps it was worth understanding them better. I am honored, Your Majesty, he said finally. I will stay. Cythera nodded. Good. You will be given quarters in the palace. You will have access to our libraries, our gardens, our people. Learn about us. And in return, teach us about your kind. She turned and walked back toward her throne. Then she paused and looked back over her shoulder. My daughter has been asking about you constantly, she said. I believe she has many questions. I suggest you start with her. Jake bowed again. As you wish, Your Majesty. As he was escorted out of the throne room, Jake felt a strange mixture of emotions. He was far from home, stuck on an alien world, told he could not leave. He should have been angry or afraid, but mostly he was curious. The Valari had spent centuries believing they understood how the universe worked. Jake had a feeling he was about to show them how wrong they were. And in her private chambers, watching through hidden cameras, Princess Khalith smiled. The human was staying. She would have all the time she needed to learn his secrets. She did not know yet that he would also learn hers. The weeks turned to months, and Jake Carter found himself settling into a strange new life on Valara Prime. He was given a set of rooms in the palace, larger than any apartment he had ever lived in on Earth. Servants brought him food and clean clothes. Scholars came to interview him about human culture and history. He was treated like something between a guest and a curiosity, but it was Princess Calith who spent the most time with him. She came to his rooms almost every day, always with new questions. She wanted to know everything about humans. How they lived, how they loved, how they died. She asked about Earth, about its oceans and mountains and cities. She asked about human families, about how parents raised their children, about what happened when people grew old. Jake answered her questions as best he could. He told her about his childhood in a small town in the middle of America. He told her about his parents, simple people who worked hard and never asked for much. He told her about joining the military at 18 because he wanted to see the stars. "You wanted to explore," Calith said. They were walking through the palace gardens, a vast space filled with plants from 100 different worlds. The light from the twin suns cast everything in shades of gold and orange. "That I can understand. All species want to explore." "It was more than that," Jake said. "I wanted to do something that mattered. I wanted to help people. Being a soldier seemed like the best way to do that." "Help people by fighting?" Calith tilted her head in that bird-like way she had. "That seems contradictory." "Sometimes you have to fight to protect what matters," Jake said. "Sometimes violence is the only way to stop greater violence. I never liked killing, but I would do it to save innocent lives." They walked in silence for a while. The garden was quiet, except for the sound of their footsteps and the gentle hum of alien insects. "Tell me about human love," Calith said suddenly. Jake almost tripped over his own feet. "What? Love, the emotional bond between humans. I have read about it, but I do not understand it. Valari form partnerships for practical reasons, politics, power, the continuation of family lines. But humans seem to choose partners based on feelings alone. How does that work?" Jake felt his face grow warm. "That is a big question. I have time." He tried to explain. He talked about attraction and chemistry, about how humans felt drawn to certain people for reasons they could not always explain, about how being in love felt like a warm light inside your chest that grew brighter whenever the other person was near. Calith listened carefully. "And this feeling makes humans happy?" "Sometimes," Jake said. "It can also make them very sad. Love does not always work out the way we hope. People fall in love with those who do not love them back. People lose the ones they love to distance or death. Love can bring great joy, but it can also bring great pain. Then why do humans seek it?" "Because the joy is worth the pain," Jake said. "Because being loved by someone, truly loved, makes everything else in the universe seem less important. Because even if it ends badly, the time you have together is precious." Calith was quiet for a long moment. Her silver eyes studied his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You speak as if you know this feeling personally," she said. Jake shrugged. "I have been in love a few times. It never lasted. Military life is hard on relationships. Do you regret it?" "No. Every person I loved taught me something. Every heartbreak made me stronger. I would not trade those experiences for anything." Calith nodded slowly. "Fascinating." As the months passed, Jake began to notice changes in the princess. She was different when she was with him than when she was with other Valari. With her own people, she was formal and distant, always proper, always controlled. But with Jake, she laughed. She made jokes. She let herself be curious and silly and young. She was also teaching him about Valari culture. She showed him the history archives, vast halls filled with records going back thousands of years. She explained the complex web of politics and alliances that held the empire together. She taught him words in her language, sounds that human throats could barely make. "You are good at this," she said one day. after Jake had managed to speak a full sentence in Valari without making any mistakes. Most humans cannot make these sounds at all. I had a good teacher, Jake said. Kellis smiled. It was a small movement of her face, but Jake had learned to read Valari expressions. That smile meant she was pleased. They were sitting on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in colors that had no names in any human language. Below them, the crystal towers glowed with internal light. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said. "You always ask things. Why stop now? What do you feel?" "About me, I mean. About our friendship." Calith was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than Jake had ever heard it. "I do not know," she admitted. "I was raised to believe that emotions were weaknesses, that attachment to individuals was dangerous, that a princess of the Valari should be above such things. And now? Now I spend every day looking forward to seeing you. I feel happy when you are empty, when you are away. I think about you when I should be thinking about other things." She turned to look at him directly. "Is this what humans call friendship?" Jake felt his heart beating faster. It could be friendship. It could also be something more. Something more? Love? Or at least the beginning of it. Kelith looked away. "That is not possible. You are human. I am Valari. Our species are too different." "Maybe," Jake said. "Or maybe we are more alike than anyone realizes." They sat in silence as the suns disappeared below the horizon and the stars came out. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. But something had changed between them, something neither of them could name. High above, in a tower overlooking the balcony, Empress Sithara watched through an observation screen. She had been monitoring her daughter's interactions with the human for months. What she saw now both surprised and concerned her. Her daughter was falling in love with a human. It should have been impossible. It should have been unthinkable. The Valari did not form emotional bonds like lesser species. They were above such things, and yet there was Calith, looking at this human with eyes that glowed with something very close to what humans called love. Sithara should have been angry. She should have separated them immediately. The political implications alone were staggering. What would the great houses say? What would the other species in the empire think? But Sithara did not feel angry. She felt curious. And somewhere deep inside, in a place she had not visited in centuries, she felt something very close to hope. Perhaps it was time for the Valari to learn something new. Perhaps this human had more to teach them than anyone had imagined. She turned off the observation screen and walked to her window. The stars were bright tonight. Somewhere out there, billions of humans lived on their small blue planet, completely unaware that one of their own was changing the course of galactic history. She smiled. It was going to be very interesting to see what happened next. The day finally came when Earth called Jake Carter home. A message arrived from the human government. Lieutenant Carter had been away for nearly a year. His assignment had been temporary, and there were duties waiting for him back on Earth. The diplomatic mission was over. It was time to return. Jake received the message in his quarters. He read it twice, then set it aside and stared out the window at the alien city that had become his home. He should have been happy. He had been away from Earth for so long. He missed the blue sky and the green trees and the feeling of rain on his skin. He missed the sound of human voices and the taste of human food. He missed home. But leaving meant leaving Kelith. And that thought hurt more than any wound he had ever received. Princess Kelith found him still staring out the window an hour later. She did not need to ask what had happened. She could see it in his face. "You are leaving," she said. "They want me to come home." Kelith walked to stand beside him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked out at the city together, watching the light shift as the twin suns moved across the purple sky. "I knew this day would come," Kellis said finally. "Humans live such short lives. You cannot spend your years waiting on an alien world." "I was not waiting," Jake said. "I was living. This year has been one of the best of my life. Because of the libraries, the gardens, the technology, because of you." Kellis turned to look at him. Her silver eyes were wet with something that might have been tears. Jake had not known that Valari could cry. "Do not say such things," she whispered. "You will only make this harder." "Then let me make it harder. Let me say what I should have said months ago." Jake took her hand in his. Her skin was cool and smooth, so different from human skin. But it felt right in his grip. "I love you, Kellis. I know it seems impossible. I know our species are different. I know we have no future together. But I love you anyway. And I needed you to know that before I left." Kellis was silent. Then, slowly, she squeezed his hand. "Valari do not believe in love," she said. "We are taught that such emotions are primitive. Beneath us. Weakness is to be overcome." She paused. "But you have taught me that what we believe is not always true. You have taught me that feelings are not weaknesses. They are strengths. And I have felt more alive in this 1 year with you than in the 120 years that came before." She lifted her other hand and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the curve of his cheek, the corner of his mouth. "I love you too, Jake Carter. In whatever way a Valari can love, I love you." Jake pulled her close and held her. They stood like that for a long time, two beings from different worlds, holding on to each other as if they might disappear. The departure ceremony was held in the great hall of the palace, the same room where Jake had nearly died a year before. The marble floor had been cleaned. No trace of blood remained. But Jake remembered. He would always remember. Empress Sithara arrived with her full court, hundreds of Valari nobles and officials arranged in perfect rows. The human delegation stood on one side, waiting for their ship to take them back to Earth. Jake stood apart from both groups, not quite belonging to either one anymore. Sithara descended from her throne and walked to stand before Jake. The room fell silent. "Lieutenant Jake Carter," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "1 year ago, you came to our world as a simple guard. You were meant to be invisible, to stand in the background, to be forgotten the moment you left." She paused and looked around at her assembled court. "Instead, you have changed everything. You have shown us that courage is not about living without fear. It is about acting despite fear. You have shown us that strength is not about never being hurt. It is about getting up after you fall, after you fall. And you have shown us that love is not a weakness. It is the greatest strength of all." Jake bowed his head. "I only did what any human would do, Your Majesty. That is exactly my point." Sithara smiled. "When I first learned about humanity, I dismissed your species as primitive, short-lived, insignificant. I was wrong. A species that produces individuals like you. Individuals who sacrifice themselves for strangers, who love without expectation of return, who see the best in others, even when they have seen the worst. That species is not primitive. That species is extraordinary." She raised her hand, and a servant came forward carrying a document sealed with the royal crest. "I am hereby offering the human species a full alliance with the Valari Empire," Sithara announced. "Not because of your technology, which is still young, not because of your resources, which are still limited, but because of your hearts. You have reminded us of something we had forgotten. You have reminded us what it means to care about something more than ourselves." A murmur went through the crowd. This was unprecedented. The Valari had never offered an alliance to such a young species. It would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Jake took the document with shaking hands. On behalf of humanity, I am honored to accept. Sithara nodded. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room. She stepped forward and embraced Jake, wrapping her arms around him like a mother embracing a son. You will always be welcome on Valara Prime, Jake Carter, she whispered in his ear. And I expect you to return. My daughter will be very unhappy if you do not. Jake smiled. I would not dream of staying away, Your Majesty. Princess Calith came forward next. She was carrying a pendant made of crystal, shaped like a star and attached to a silver chain. The symbol of the Valari royal house. This marks you as a friend of the crown, she said, placing it around his neck. Wherever you go in this galaxy, you carry our protection and our gratitude. No Valari will ever harm you or allow you to be harmed. Jake touched the pendant. It was warm against his skin, pulsing with some inner light. Thank you, he said. For everything. Calith leaned close, so close that only he could hear her next words. Come back to me, she whispered. Promise me you will come back. I promise, Jake said. Nothing in the universe could keep me away. They looked at each other for one long moment. So much passed between them in that look. So much that could not be put into words. Then Jake stepped back, bowed to the Empress, and walked toward the human delegation. His time on Valara Prime was over. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that this was not the end. As the human ship lifted off from the planet, Jake stood at the observation window and watched the alien world shrink below him. The crystal towers, the purple sky, the twin suns, all growing smaller and smaller until they were just a point of light among millions. Somewhere down there, a princess was watching his ship disappear into the stars. Somewhere down there, a queen was already planning for his return. Jake touched the pendant around his neck and smiled. He had come to Valara Prime as a simple soldier. He was leaving as a bridge between two civilizations. He had saved a princess, won the respect of an empress, and found a love that crossed the boundaries between species. Not bad for a human. The ship jumped to hyperspace, and the stars stretched into lines of light. In a few weeks, he would be home. He would see Earth again, feel the sun on his face, breathe air that did not come from machines. But a part of him would remain on Valara Prime forever. And a part of Valara Prime would travel with him wherever he went. Some stories end with farewells. But this one was just beginning. Because Jake Carter was not the kind of man who made promises he did not keep. And he had promised to return. The Valari did not know much about humans. But they were about to learn one very important thing. Humans always keep their promises.